All right, let's just do the dang thing. Mayday, August 27th, 2025. Many things have happened, and this isn't gonna make Philadelphia Philly fans very happy, but we are going to start off with our first topic of the day, talking about thoracic outlet syndrome in baseball, or TOS, for those of you that are in the know. This is far and away, I think, the biggest threat to pitchers moving forward of any injury, including Tommy John surgery. For years, it was the other one, but now it seems like TOS is becoming more and more prevalent. So we're gonna talk about it, what it means, and how it's gonna affect these Philadelphia Phillies and this gentleman, Zach Wheeler. Now, Zach Wheeler is down for the year. He needs thoracic outlet surgery, and he's out for the rest of the season. This is not as uncommon as a lot of people think it is. It is a surgery that is around your collarbone area. We will talk about specifics, but he was the presumptive NL Cy Young, which that's a big blow, and Philadelphia Phillies have a 5-game lead in the NL East, but they don't have their ace anymore. Now, Aaron Nola is coming back, and they do have a fairly deep rotation, especially with how well Taijuan Walker has thrown lately, but the guy was probably going to win his first Cy Young, and now that's probably not going to happen because there's a gentleman named, you may have heard of him, Paul Skeens, hot on his heels, and it looks like those counting stats he was winning in are not going to be able to hold him out. So on their quest to win their first World Series since 2008, the year that they drafted Trevor May in the 4th round, which is obviously the reason they did end up winning that World Series. The fact that he's hurt might not even be the worst part. The injury itself could potentially be complicated moving forward, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. Now, this is not Philadelphia sports fans' first run-in with this specific injury. You may remember this gentleman, Markelle Fultz. After being their first-round pick a few years ago, went to the NBA and simply could not hit a shot, could not hit the rim a lot of times. He looked like he was in Space Jam and the Monstars has stolen his mojo. That's what it looked like. But it turns out he also had thoracic outlet syndrome, which needs to be able to feel a piece of equipment like a ball, and in order to manipulate that ball in subtle ways in order to do their job well. Those type of jobs are so hard to do when you have thoracic outlet syndrome, okay? So I know that's two not so happy memories at the same time, but there is hope in here. Just bear with me, okay? So what is thoracic outlet syndrome? So anyone who has heard the word thoracic spine, loosening up your back, basically it just means your upper spine. That's your thoracic area, includes your ribs and the scalene muscles that go underneath your pecs and connect into your ribs, move your basically shoulders forward and backwards, along with your neck muscles and your traps and and the delts and everything else, okay? But you can see it here. There is your collarbone, which is this big bone that sticks out. Everyone knows where the collarbone is. But a lot of people don't know that your first rib, that top rib, tucks right up under that collarbone. And in between those two bones, we have a set of nerves, and we have some arteries and some veins. So like there's this bundle of stuff that goes through here, and your thoracic outlet is the gap between those bones. So when you hear thoracic outlet syndrome, it means there's something wrong with your thoracic outlet, which is pinching something in that group of things, okay? So this manifests in a lot of ways. One, you get dead arm, meaning you're not getting good circulation or your nerve is getting pinched. So either way, it's not allowing you to really feel that ball coming off your hand, and it just kind of feels like fatigue because it's like getting a little bit less oxygen, right? You get 10% oxygen in Colorado, you just kind of generally feel more tired without really feeling anything crazy, right? You feel normal otherwise, you just can't catch your breath as easy. It's that type of thing. And it's hard to tell how much this is being pinched until you start getting severe symptoms, which we're going to talk about in a minute. You can get numbness and tingling. I've played with guys who've had thoracic outlet to where as soon as it dropped below 70 degrees outside, their fingers that they pushed off of to throw the ball, or their middle fingers most of the time, because these are the biggest ones with the most distance for blood to travel before it goes back towards your heart, they would turn white and they become numb. It's very similar to like being cold. When your fingers get cold and they start to turn white, that is exactly, it feels like your fingers are cold when it's not cold outside. And I played with more than one guy who had this happen. So that type of stuff is happening pretty regularly. Sometimes in extreme cases, you lose motor control, like your brain tells your arm to do something and it just ignores you. That's obviously in a very intense pinch. And then circulatory issues, like I just mentioned, like you're just not getting blood where blood needs to go. So The reason this is common in baseball, and also it's common in other sports that involve overhand, sometimes tennis players get it, cricket, like any throwing, water polo, these are things that could possibly have thoracic outlet be something that's normally seen in their sport. But it's the throwing mechanics, basically. You are pinching that area over and over and over again, your body starts to compensate. I've talked about this a lot on this show, about how we're all just big chains of compensation that we've learned throughout our lives that turns into our anatomy and who we are. Like our bones form that way and our muscles form that way. It's very interesting about being a human being, but part of that can be you start to close that thoracic outlet because of the nature of what you do, and there's not a lot you can do to keep that under control. There's basically 3 main types of TOS, and I want to talk about different guys in the league who have got them and what it meant for their career, because I think one of these 3s, I think if it is far along, is probably the biggest red flag for a pitcher's efficacy moving forward, like effectiveness. And that is one big issue. A lot of guys are coming back from TOS, and the ability to bounce back to your pre-levels, the percentages are much lower now than Tommy John. They were about the same at the beginning. Now it's not as good. So there's neurogenic, right, which is the most common because that nerve that runs through is the biggest part of the bundle, okay? So if your nerve gets pinched, you can get nerve damage, and right now modern science doesn't know how to heal nerves. You can't heal a nerve all the way back up. That's one of the biggest things lacking right now for our ability to keep people healthy. Unfortunately, that's 90 to 95% of cases. It's the brachial plexus nerves that go through here, and then those split off into the UCL and the humeral nerve, which I've had my own tingly problems with before. Nerves suck. Imagine hitting your funny bone against crap all the time. It sucks. Okay, then there's venous, which means your veins. Those are the smallest. It's just a collection of different veins that connect in different parts of your arm, and some of those can get pinched, hurting blood flow. They can be potentially very dangerous because they lead to blood clots. The same thing with arterial. You have an artery that also runs through that bunch of nerves, and in that case, you do not want to have backup of blood. That is bad. Blood clots that stop blood flowing for any amount of time could be potentially fatal, especially if they make it to your heart. So these are actually like life-threatening if you don't treat them, and a lot of times they don't show up until right when they need treated. But we do have good ways to treat them once you find them. So blood clots are one big danger here as well. So there's 2 related to blood, 1 related to the nerves. So why is it so scary? Well, 1, it's very hard to know it's happening until you have symptoms. And in this very specific case, like you're feeling numbness, or you're getting arm fatigue, or you get a blood clot, all of those symptoms could potentially be too far gone in order to fully reverse any damage being done and potentially put your life at risk or risk of other very bad outcomes that could affect you for the rest of your life outside of sports. Like this is no joke, right? But if you're feeling the numbness and you're having lasting nerve damage, you can't heal that. So that might not go away even if it is addressed through surgery, which is scary, and I understand. Now, as far as I know and from what I've read, Zach Wheeler has venous. He has the blood version. There was a clotting happening, which is scary, but they caught it early. So the venous and the arterial are the better versions for pitching because nerve damage is something you can't mess with. You're not going to be able to come back. But if you can handle a blood clot, we have much better outcomes coming back and being able to pitch at your full level if it's one of those 2. So that's the good news for Zach Wheeler and for Phillies fans, which, I mean, I never want anyone to have to lose any part of their career because of injury. So thank God. Thank God for that. It's scary because you can't see the symptoms till they're done. And one study done in 2020 on the Journal of Shoulder and Elbow Surgery found only about 65% of pitchers return to their previous level of play. That's only 2 of every 3. We do have some examples of the good ones, but we also have some examples of that being true as well. And we will talk about that in a moment too. So some of those guys that have been affected by TOS in the past, Steven Strasburg. Steven Strasburg, after winning that World Series in 2019 and signing the big contract, struggled mightily with the nerve-related TOS, which then gave him nerve damage over time. He tried to pitch through it a lot too long, and he was never, ever the same because once you get diminished feel in your fingertips for feeling your pitches, that's most of the time all she wrote. Now, it might not hurt, but it'll never feel good again, and you'll never have that touch that you had before, which more than anything else might just be so frustrating that you just don't want to do it anymore, which I totally could understand. Chris Carpenter, another guy. You remember him from his baggy 3/4 sleeves, was a dominant pitcher for the Cardinals. He had his career cut a little bit short for the same exact reason, having to have surgery to work on that thoracic outlet. and it was nerve related. I believe he had a little bit of both. It was very constricted in there, and so it was kind of an ongoing process. I also played with a couple guys that had this too. We have Matt Harvey. After in 2016, he had to have thoracic outlet surgery. Did the Dark Knight ever come back and play at the level he was before, throwing 98, 99? This had something to do with it, but he was able to play a little bit longer, but was never the exact same as he was. And then we had Chris Archer in 2020. He didn't pitch much after this happened as well. And even outside of Zach Wheeler, we had John Gray recently go on the IL with TOS-related symptoms, and they're contemplating whether or not he wants to have surgery. And he even threw out, this could be the last time that I pitch. I might be done after this because this is the type of surgery that is very hard to come back from, and no matter how hard you work, you might still not have what you need to be effective as a pitcher. I hope he doesn't pull the trigger on that and he hits an opportunity to pitch again, then it's something minor, but that just shows you how serious this can be. I even played in 2013 with a left-handed pitcher with the Dodgers organization named Mike Thomas. One day he showed up at the field and he was fine. About an hour later, his left arm, he's lefty, his left arm had swollen up to twice the size of his right arm, and they were like, that is blood clot. Like, that is what that is. So they got him to the emergency room. He came back later that day and they said, yeah, my thoracic outlet, I have a giant blood clot that has just stopped up here and no blood is flowing back to my heart from my arm, like very little, and it's pooling in my arm. So they have to drain it, had to drain it. They're gonna have to do that a couple times. And he was in a lot of trouble because it was a big one and it could have been potentially fatal if they had not caught it, for another 24 hours or something, which is terrifying. And that's the first experience I had with it, just seeing it in real time, like, oh my God, that's terrifying. It turned out to be even scarier than I thought it was. So, how do you fix it and how do you prevent it? Well, it's pretty straightforward. So you see how those things fit in. So this bone right here that is underneath this bundle is your first rib. It is a rib that attaches to the top up here and goes right under, it's like right underneath your collarbone. And there's all these intercostal muscles around it and sheathing, all this stuff. And everyone's gap here is different size for whatever reason. Everyone is different. So some people are just predispositioned to have a really narrow area here. Some aren't, right? So number one thing is they look at that rib, because this rib is, for all intents and purposes, it's not structurally important for posture. It's not one of your major structural components. It's kind of like, not fully like the hamate bone in your hand, but evolution has rendered it not as important. So you can remove part of that bone, or that bone if it's small, completely in order to just open that thing up. So Phil Hughes, I believe it was 2016, Phil Hughes with the Twins, he had thoracic outlet, then he tried to come back and had to have more of the rib removed and never got back to form and ended up retiring. So removing that first rib is number one. Some people have like an extra little piece of rib up there. Some people, like, there's a bunch of stuff that can happen there. So number one would be widening that gap, and the best way to do it is to shave down that bone or remove it entirely, which is recovery in its own, right? Now you have no bone there, so something might change in your delivery, and then you gotta learn all that stuff. So it's a long return. That is usually what the surgery means. It's just opening the gap up, spreading everything out, kind of like when you're trying to clean up your elbow for Tommy John surgery and make sure everything's sitting where it needs to sit. There are, though, and this is something that I was made sure I did, especially when we learned about TOS for the last few years of my career, was maintenance. So there are all kinds of training techniques and like massage techniques where they can get in there with tools and scrape that thing out, and it feels like they're hitting your nerve. It's not comfortable. It feels terrible, but you have these things called scalene muscles that kind of go underneath that are part of your throwing motion. So sometimes those are so tight that they constrict this bundle. And if you loosen those up, that usually can relieve it a little bit and make sure that you don't get to the point where you're squeezing it for so long that you actually damage stuff. Stuff's gonna get squeezed, it's part of pitching, but you need to release it. And that is becoming more of the way that they do it. You can also get imaging beforehand. I know that some teams are doing this more and more, and they're just making sure they can see that thing before anything problem happens so that they can get you on a program to maintain it if you have a naturally narrower path than others. So like, they now know where it is and what's going on when it happens, that they can monitor it and be proactive in determining what that is. So in the case of Zach Wheeler, it is the venous version. He did have a small blood clot. He is going to be treated. I don't know if surgery is on the table. If he's missing the rest of the season, it probably is, but I expect him to have a good chance of coming all the way back because it has happened, right? We had Merrill Kelly have it in 2020 as well. His went really clean. He came right back and he was fine, right? So sometimes the symptoms aren't based on lasting damage. They're just based on early discomfort, and you can get a symptom somewhere else that isn't directly in to your arm. I believe he had dead arm, if I remember this correctly, and this was one of the first things they checked, and they caught it early. So that's the key, is catching this thing early. And thoracic outlet, unfortunately though, there's not a lot else you can do from there. And that 65% success rate doesn't seem like it's gonna be as easy to bring up like Tommy John was, because Tommy John became a very straightforward procedure, and they develop a lot of different ways to remove different places, move your stuff around or not need to move your stuff around, replace it, different areas in the body that you can do to add. With bracing techniques, we've got all these things that don't necessarily translate to your thoracic outlet. So it is scary, and it is quickly becoming the number one, I think, dampening of pitchers' careers. It is very clearly something that you want to avoid with all costs, but fortunately with this awareness, pitchers are gonna get better. So in conclusion, TOS is partly anatomical, partly overuse, okay? Something to do with the width of it and then how much whatever your motion does to attack it. But these things now we can start to predict how to affect that, so that's getting better. It's not nearly as preventable as UCL with like usage, because little changes in motion can really aggravate this, and UCL needs kind of a lot of force, right? The amount of force needed is different, but many experts believe that as pitchers throw harder, this is something we're gonna see more and more. And so something to pay attention to. I want everyone to fully understand, because I think this one's in the baseball zeitgeist and not talked about enough. But thoracic outlet syndrome, the thing no pitcher wants to see, and no ex-pitcher wants to see any other pitchers have either. But now you know, so like and subscribe to the video so you don't miss any really hopeful videos like this in the future. Yeah, it's kind of crazy.